a computer. So welcome back for our last but not least speaker. Okay, where did he go? I don't know. Start from corner slide. Yes, even my computer is starting to refuse to collaborate after this long marathon. But hey, welcome Paula. So Paula is a user experience design at Fortum, and she's dedicated to crafting exceptional user experience and interface for business customers. She has a passion for blending creativity and functionality, and she excels at translating complex idea into intuitive design. That is the concept that's being recording today. It's like if it's easier to explain to the 5 years old, so it's an easy you understood the concept and you are mastering it. So you are basically translating those ideas into design. Armed with a deeply understanding of user-centered design principle and a keen eye for detail and a strong problem-solving skill, she creates innovative solutions that not only meet the user's needs, but also align with business objectives. So thanks a lot, Paula, for being here. Now I will stop to share my screen and I will give you the power to present.
Thank you for having me. So as Lucia said, I'm Paula. I'm a user experience designer at Fortum. I've been there for about 1.5 years now, and my focus there is to create solutions for business customers. And this is a customer-facing position, let's say. So if Fortum, you could work doing internal design, so for internal systems and customer systems, and I work with the customers in this case. I'll talk today about user experience design, what it is, what I do, what you could do as a user experience designer, about my day-to-day at Fortum, and then about how it is to be working there, how was my process there when I started. So I've been a designer since 2015 when I graduated from college. I'll talk about my background a little bit ahead. I started working with graphic design, mostly for social media, creating also like graphic print stuff. And then I became a multidisciplinary designer. So as you start working, you see you need other skills. So I started doing motion, I started doing interaction, and then I moved to digital products and then UX and UI. And I've been working mostly with web UX and UI design since 2018. So it's been about 5 years now that I focus on that. I still do other stuff, and in UX, you need a lot of different skills to be a good UX designer. So they actually do come in handy in the end. So what is user experience design? User experience design is the process the design team uses to create products that provide meaningful and relevant experience to users. UX design involves the design of the entire process of acquiring and integrating the product, including aspects of branding, design, usability, and function. So user experience is everything that the user is in touch with. So we take into consideration a lot of different things. We had just a presentation about service design, and that is like, for me, the step that usually comes a little bit before we start working in the digital product. So we have someone that helps us out mapping the customer journey, for example, and then we identify problems or opportunities in that journey. And then the UX team comes in and say, okay, let's go deeper into this part, doing that part. So we understand the customer journey. We understand where business wants to go. So let's say, oh, we want to do this right now. We want to explore that right now. We have this opportunities. Then we do it. And then, of course, when we're thinking about UX, we also think about the brand itself. So what is the brand, what the brand wants, where do we want to go in the future? So we think also long-term about where the product will go. My colleague Giza also mentioned about design thinking, and we use design thinking as well. The UX design thinking map, it's slightly different from the service design one, but it works pretty much the same way. So we have different phases, and it's imperative as well. So we begin with empathizing. So first of all, we had our service design journey mapping, and we identify an opportunity or a problem there. And then we're going to investigate what is the problem there. So in this phase, usually we conduct user interviews that could be done by UX designer, a UX researcher, or a service designer. And then we talk to people. We interview users, we interview business stakeholders, we interview consumers, we understand what's happening. So we can really dig deep into the problem opportunity. After doing this, we're going to go into more definition part of the process. So we understood what's happening, and then we're going to select one thing to solve, because we cannot tackle all problems at once. So we select one thing and then say, okay, let's solve this problem first. After that, we go to the ideation phase. And of course, I'm talking here more about the UX perspective. So I'm focusing on digital products and services, not on the whole view as service designers do. So this means that we're going to create something that, like, oh, how can we solve this problem? We create ideas, we can create maps, we can create wireframes already here. We can start understanding how we're going to solve this. In this phase, we also understand a little bit about what other people do to solve this problem. So we do a lot of benchmarking. So we look at competitors, we look at completely different products as well, because inspiration comes from everywhere. And we understand how people are doing things differently out there. Then we combine everything we've done into a prototype. This prototype can come in many forms, in many ways. It could be a paper prototype. It could be just a wireframe. And when I say wireframe, it means like something that doesn't have any colors, any images. It's just like a little skeleton of a website, of an app. Or it could be something very high-end that is like a real mock-up. Like you see that, you think it's a finished product. In general, if you work in a company that is pretty big, like I do, we have something called a design system. And that helps a lot, because when you're creating these mock-ups, you already have the little things created. So you have buttons, you have toggles, you have inputs, you have everything that you need to create a digital experience already made for you. So you don't have to think about those. And then you can create a mock-up that's a little bit more in the high-end, high fidelity part of things. And then finally, we test. This test could be done, for example, with user testing. So we get this mock-up, we show it to people and ask what they think. Or if we are at a phase that we are mostly sure that this is a good design, we can go straight to production, and then we will test it live. So it comes to, let's say I did something for the website, so it goes live on the website, and then we ask for feedback and see how it works. It will really depend on what you're doing, if it's something big or small, because if it's something small, it costs not a lot to test it online. If something big, costs a lot to test it online. So then you're not going to put your effort into producing that to test. Then we test it with people. After we test it, we go back. We see what worked, what didn't work, and then we start over. We work with products that are continuous. So it's not, I don't end the projects in general. I create it, it goes online. We see what happened. We see how can we improve it. We go back to the beginning. Or if, let's say, oh, I created this feature, it's great. We check customer feedback or business ideas to see what's the next feature we're going to create for that product. As I mentioned, I work with business, B2B customers. So I focus on that area. So, oh, business now need this, or we face this problem, or there's this new thing that the government made for businesses, and we have to show them how it works. So we go back, draft, create a new feature for the product that I'm currently working on. What are the UX fields? So UX design nowadays is a broad position, let's say, because it kind of groups everything. And it depends a lot on the type of company you work for. So if you're working on a company that doesn't have what we call design maturity, a UX designer might be required to do everything that I just said in this process. And that actually is more like a product designer position. If you are in a company like Spotify that has a high design maturity, you have different positions for every step, basically. So you have the UX researcher that will focus on the first part of empathizing and then testing concepts. So they will basically only do user research. They will recruit people, they will create questionnaires, they will create surveys, they will conduct the interviews, they will analyze the data from these interviews. And they'll make sure everything is well documented and stored, because this is always like something important for us in a company, that all the researches you do are well stored, because that data is important for future products. So this would be a position on research. There are many positions like that in big companies here, so it's possible to work only in this field. The UX designer, as I said, nowadays has a broad meaning. It could mean doing everything, or doing just what the UX designer should do. That is getting the data from the UX researcher, creating user flows, creating a map, in creating a wireframe or a low fidelity mockup. In an ideal world, UX designers do not need to create interfaces. So they do not need to do real like design in the sense of going and putting colors into things. In general, for the positions I see in Finland, that's not the case. In general, the positions for UX designer also requires doing user interfaces. Then you have the role of UX writer. That would be the person that would just write the copy that you have for user experience. So that copy usually means that's like all texts that are connected to experience. So what does each button say? What the menu labels say? What the call to action on buttons say, and how everything works together. So anything that's like this type of copy would be the work of a UX writer. In general, if you have longer text, usually they're marketing texts, and then you have a content creator to do just those texts. So that's also a different position. And usually UX writer is a very specific position, because you have to be very good at being able to write short, concise, and clear copy. So you have to be able to make sure that people understand what you mean in 2 words. So when you see whatever interface that you see in the apps that you use, whatever is written on the buttons is exactly what the UX writer should be writing. So it has to be very concise and good. Then we go to UI designer. So it's user interface design. That means putting color into things. So creating buttons, creating input fields, creating the whole interface together. So adding things together, and how does that look, adding the fonts and all that. As I said, usually big companies have a design system, so you might not have a specific UI designer for that. And usually you can hire an external agency to do this kind of brand system for you. What happens in real life is that even when you have the design system, 3 different designers can create completely different screens using the same elements. I can create 5. This week I did that. I created 5 different screens using the same elements, and said, we need to decide on a UI, because it could be anything. If you have a specific UI designer, that person will be the one that's like there just to do that. And then last but not least, you have product designer. Product designer, that the digital product designer would be someone that's usually doing all of those roles or overseeing them as well, and is in charge also of the product strategy, helping the product owner to decide where the product is going, what are the next things to do, and so on and so forth. So when you read the job description, you will see that I think most positions nowadays are mostly focusing on product design, to be honest, even though they say UX design. So you might be expected to do all of the above items. What skills do you need to be a UX designer? So here I'll talk a little bit about my background. So I have background in communication and marketing, and a master's in brand management. And the main skill for me as a UX designer is communication. I spent most of my days in meetings and talking to people. And if you're not a good communicator, this is not a job for you. You have to learn how to talk in public. You have to learn how to talk to other people. You have to learn how to give feedback and receive feedback. So these are the most important skills in a UX designer. You don't need to know how to do great interfaces. If you can learn how to be a good communicator, the technical skills can come later. They are not the most, they are relevant, of course, but they are not the core of being a good UX designer. You need to understand people. You need to be able to talk to them. This is the most important things. When you go into the soft skills, as I said, you need to be able to do good presentations, manage stakeholders. So we have to be good at convincing people about your ideas and understanding what they're saying, giving the feedback and receiving feedback. That's very important because we get a lot of feedback and the feedback is not good most of the time. So you have to be humble enough to understand that maybe their design is not good and you have to redo it. And that's okay. If you don't have that mindset, this is not going to work for you. You also have to be able to do some project management because in general, you might be working a project alone or not have a lead in your project. So you will be the lead. So you need to decide when you're doing your tasks, how are you doing your tasks, when are your deadlines. So you need to be good at that. And you have to be able to do workshop facilitation and public speaking, as I said. So workshop facilitation, you can maybe have the help of a service designer, but it's not often true. So you have to have these techniques about facilitating workshops. That's a really important thing as well. When we go to technical skills, as I said, they might not be the most rank at the highest if you want to be just a UX designer. But you should have a keen eye for details. You have to be able to learn new softwares. So in general, what we use as a standard for the industry nowadays is Figma. But it's also interesting to understand how to use the Adobe suite. So Photoshop, Illustrator. I also like using After Effects because I do motion design as well. And that is part of interaction design in UX. So if you are able to gather all those cues, and you can learn little by little. It's not something that you have to know everything at once. In my team, we have different expertises. For example, I'm good at motion. Most people are not, and that's okay. If they have to do motion, I will help them. So this is important also to keep in mind. But see, on those skills, learn a little bit of Figma and then see what you like and then go deeper into that one. It's always an advantage. And then, of course, design is everywhere in everything. So interest for arts in general is quite interesting to be able for you to have design that is good for the design. So being able to bring references that might not only be online or digital references into your work is always very important. Then we move on to collaboration. When you're a designer, you are working with several people. I will talk about my day-to-day, but I work with developers, I have product owner, I have business stakeholders, I have the whole design team that works with me. So you have to be able to learn how to work with these people. Might not be the easiest thing sometimes because you have very different fields. So working with a developer is very different than working with a business expert. That is very different than working with another designer. So you do need to learn how to work with everyone. And then we move on to user research. It is important to understand how to conduct interviews. And again, this comes back to communication. If you might not be the greatest writing a script, for example, for an interview, but if you know how to conduct it, you're already halfway there. And then problem solving. We, as UX designers, are solving problems all the time. So we need to be good at that. And that is a soft skill that you have to learn in all other areas. Having said all that, do I need a background in design to be a UX designer or in communication? And then my answer to that is no. For you to be a good UX designer, you could have a background, I think, in generally any of humanity areas, because as I said, communication is most important, and the other things you can learn. So you can come from a different area and go into UX. It's just important that you keep in mind that you have to be a good communicator. And I will not stress this enough because, again, most of my work is talking to people. So what do I do at Fortum all day? So in general, I have daily tech meetings. So this means that I have a development team that is about 12 people. So I have 10 developers, 1 Scrum Master, and 1 product owner. I meet them every day. We talk about what's happening in the team, if anyone has any problems and needs help, if anything needs explanation, if there are any technical difficulties and we have to change the design, for example. So that's what we do in the mornings. Every day, we do that. I also have several design meetings, and those could just be weekly meetings in which we talk about what we have been working on. It could be sparring sessions and review sessions for other people's work. It could also be, I ideation session in which other designers invite me, for example, to help on their projects and help them create new solutions. It really depends. And then we have stakeholder management. This means meeting usually business stakeholders and seeing if there's anything they need from you, or just really explaining and assuring them that things are going in the right direction. Fortum specifically is not a design or customer-centered business. So we do need to make a lot of reassurances that we're going the right direction, that we have data on the things we're doing, that we have user interviews, that basically we know we're doing the right thing. This is something that we constantly have to do, but it also relates to the design maturity of the company. In my experience there, I've been in the same product for a year and a half. Nowadays, people do know who I am, they know what I do. And when I say, oh, we're going this direction, they understand where I come from. So I don't have to do this much stakeholder management as I have to do in a new project. So whenever I go into a new product or a new project, I start having to do a lot of this convincing that as a design team, we know what we're doing. And then last but not least, I do my actual work, which is a little bit sad to say, but I usually have very few hours a day to actually sit down and design and do research and read articles about UX design. So in the end, as I said, it's a lot about communicating and talking to people, understanding problems, and then you have some time to do your work, especially at Fortum. We have a lot of meetings. It's a very corporate world, so we have a lot of meetings there. And what else I wanted to say is that when you think about project management, this also comes into play, because you have to be able to work out your schedule in a way that you're able to do all of that in your 7.5 hours of work a day. So it is very important that you're able to do everything. How is Fortum as an employer? So I started at Fortum, as I said, about a year and a half ago. I talked to my manager, and the process varies a lot from hiring manager to hiring manager. So I'll talk specifically about the project process I went through and other people in the design team went through. And it was in this order, but it might change depending on who is hiring. So usually you have a first CV screening, then you have a test that is like a logical test to make sure you are a good fit for the team. That is agreed between the hiring manager and the HR. If you pass that test, you have your first interview with the hiring manager. Then in my case, I had a skill test. So I had a briefing and I had to come up with a solution for the problem and with a mock-up. And then in my second interview, I had to explain everything that I'd done. In the second interview, usually you have other designers that are also evaluating your work. And then if you pass that one, you go to an HR interview. This process specifically, I think for big companies can take several months. So it's not something fast. In my case, it took almost 3 months until I got my contract. So even after I finished the HR interview, it took a long time for me to get a contract. It is quite normal for big companies to take that long. I have experience with other big companies that are exactly the same thing. So just be patient there. You have to understand things take time. And I think for UX specifically, it's really important. Like you should have a portfolio for your CV, but you don't need to have visuals in your portfolio. You have to, don't put just visuals, you have to explain your thinking behind what's happening. So why is this looking like this? What was the thought behind it? That's much more important than the UI, the interface that you're doing there. Because again, in general, if you're applying for UX, even though they might require UI, they do need your thought process behind it. I'll mention already, because I know there was the question before, Fortum nowadays has a hybrid work policy. So we should go to the office twice a week. My manager in particular does not care how often we go to the office. My team, though, we do go to the office pretty often. We like being together, we designers. So I go to the office like almost every day if I can, when I'm not like traveling. I go to the office pretty often. It's really, for me, I worked as a freelance designer for quite a while as well. Having other designers by my side just to ask, what do you think about this? Is a big part of my work, like my day, being able to share and help and be helped and get the feedback is really, really important. I really like going to the office just to do that. Besides that, Fortum has offices in several countries. The design team, my design team is in Finland, Norway, and Stockholm. We have a second design team at Fortum that is also in Poland. So it depends a little bit. Right now, I do know that we don't have open vacancies for the design team. That might not be true in the future. So it's always important to check our careers page. I have added resources to learn about UX. My favorite, you might have seen that some of my graphics are from Interaction Design Foundation. I'm really a big fan of Interaction Design Foundation. I've done several courses there. They're always adding new content and I'm always learning something new. Then you have the News and Norman group, that is the reference for UX design. They have courses as well. Their courses are very expensive, but they're really nice. But they also have an extensive library of both videos and text that you can read. I added a UX Collective, that's a Medium blog that collects several UX writing things. Design Lab is also another course that you can take online. You have the Figma YouTube channel. So if you want to learn Figma, the first place you should go is to their YouTube channel. It is very good. They have several videos explaining right from the beginning of Figma. So you can learn everything you need for Figma there. And then UX Helsinki, it's a Slack group that we have for UXers here in Helsinki. Every now and then there's a talk or there's a meetup that you can join. If you want to get a job in UX, it is important that you know people. It is much easier to find jobs if you are connected to people who are working in the industry. And now I'm going to open for questions. And I see we might have a few on the chat.
Yeah, do you want to read the questions yourself or would you like me to read them out?
I think you could read them.
Okay, good. So first question, how you found out that design is your field?
How did I find out that design is my field? That's a very good question. I had a background in communication and marketing. My college, I learned a lot about design as well. We had several subjects in design. I guess in the beginning, I thought I wanted to go towards marketing. And then when you get to internships and day-to-day work, I was like, yeah, that's not my thing. I like creating stuff. And then I went towards graphic, working in graphic, and then finally going through web. I understood that I really liked more the part of creating this experience and not creating the visual side so much. Even though today I still do UI, I do much less UI than I used to do working for an agency, for example. So that's how I got very deep into UX. And then in the end, I think a lot of what I learned in my communication degree is applied to UX because I had a lot of things related to market research, for example, psychology, anthropology, that are really applied into UX when you start doing interviews and really creating the experiences.
Very nice, and it's nice that it shows that it's a process, and also for you. And so if somebody is interested in the UX field, it's okay, to get start working, start from somewhere, and then during this process, figure out like where would you like to focus more. So it's very, very encouraging. There is also a question from Erin. Could you suggest any peer groups for following joining? But I think that was answered by your last slide.
Yes, you can.
There were many suggestions.
Yeah, you can definitely join the Slack. It's really nice. There is also a marketing group that's nice to join, though it's focused on marketing. Marketing and UX often work hand in hand as well, so it's nice to join. And then if you find any designers that you like here, message them on LinkedIn. Maybe you can send your portfolio and ask for feedback. And in general, if you do that and you actually take the feedback into consideration, we really appreciate that. And when we are hiring, we will take that into consideration, actually. You definitely have a hand up, because in general, if someone sends their portfolio and say, oh, could you look at my portfolio and tell me what you think? And you take your time to do that, give the feedback, and the person doesn't do anything about it, it's a little bit like you're wasting your time. So if you do change your portfolio based on what some designer that you like said, they will really take that very dearly.
A good, very good tip for those for job seekers here. There's also a question. Could you please, throw some light on what is internal design?
So internal design would be more like for systems that are used inside the company. So for example, as I said, I do products that are customer facing, in the sense that people buy a product at Fortum, they will see what I did. And when you create an internal design, for example, Fortum has power plants. It could be something for a power plant. So that means that only people inside Fortum will see that system. Or it could be some internal system for HR, for example. It could be something for onboarding. So all those things are also created by designers. And then we have two different teams, one that creates more these solutions that are for internal things, and then one that creates the customer facing solutions. That's the team I'm part of.
Can you also kind of tell some suggestions, like what is the difference or how to pick into which team to apply to? Like, are there some personal characteristics that should be different, or is it easier to get into the internal design team versus the external? Or what would be your insight?
I think they're pretty similar. I'm quite close to the other team as well. Both teams are really nice. If you have a preference, maybe you like working, for example, for external products, that's great. I think both things are really nice to do, and they have the good and bad parts. For example, I work with long-standing products, while the other teams works with projects. So they have a project, they do it, they deliver it, it's ended. So it depends a little bit on what you like in that level. So let's say that maybe working for the internal team feels a little bit more if you are in an agency or if you are in a consulting part that you do projects, and then working where I do, because how we are organized, I have a product that's long-standing, so I'll always be in that product as many years may come. But this is how we are organized nowadays. So I have my product, I'll work on that product.
That's very good insights again. There's also a question from Nicolina that reflects to your one of the slides about the hiring process in the company. Is it the same for internship positions?
In general, the process is the same, meaning you always have all of those steps, but it might differ when you do each according to the hiring manager. So you always have everything that's there. But sometimes the hiring manager decides to do the test after the first interview. Sometimes they will actually ask you to do the skill test after even a second interview and do a third interview with you. It really depends a little bit on who is hiring.
Okay, makes sense. Is it also possible in your organization to kind of go past this process and just, I don't know, write to some people or somebody in HR, I'm interested in an internship?
No, because Fortum is a public company. We have a very strict recruiting process, and it's actually a blind process. So in most points, the hiring manager does not actually have access to your personal data. They just see your skills and qualifications.
That's very interesting.
So for example, my manager did not know where I was from, my age, anything like that, until she actually met me, actually in person, because I think she thought I was Italian until basically our last talk when I was starting a week after. So I'm not Italian, by the way, even though I speak Italian, I'm not Italian, I'm Brazilian. So this is something that it's because it's a governmental company, it's actually pretty good in my opinion. So
very interesting. First time I hear a hiring process like that, but it's very, very good for probably those who are internationals, because there might be some biases, even though we try to overcome them, but we are all biased to some extent. There's also a question, what is important when creating your own portfolio, and which tools could be used for creating it?
I think to create a good UX portfolio, it's interesting for you to first think about something. You either start a project from scratch, let's say. So, oh, I have an idea for a new app. And then you try to do the whole process on that. So even if you like, of course, you don't have to conduct several user interviews and stuff like that, but like you can say, oh, I talked to 3 people that were in my close group of friends, and document that. How did you talk to these people? What did you get from these interviews? And then show, oh, then I did this little mock-up, or then I came up with this idea or concept, then I tested it again, and then they said this, and really go through the thought process of doing step by step. What did you do in each step, and how did you get to the final solution? This is important in UX, is about solving the problems. So it's more important about than how it looks like in the end. I'll definitely say that. Which tools
So
you
the
should
process, yeah.
the process is more important for UX design. If you're going for a UI position, then no, you need the UI, you need the visual. People will need to see that your screen looks beautiful and perfect. Doesn't matter how you got to that, but it has to look beautiful and perfect. And maybe the beautiful and perfect doesn't really work very well. That happens as well. So it's like, it's a different skill, let's say, a little bit. And tools to use, you can use any website builder to build your website, but you can actually create your whole portfolio inside Figma. And I do recommend you do that as a junior or as an intern. You don't have to pay for external service to do that. You can create everything in Figma. So that's a very big thing and very easy to do. And you use your skills in Figma to show that you can use it, and you learn how to use Figma properly.
Good point. There's another question. How often do you use UE skills as a UX designer?
In my position, I use UI every day because of the way my company is structured and our maturity in design. I do everything for the product. So I do the UI as well, even though we have the system, as I mentioned. So I have pre-made elements like buttons and input fields. The way I organize those things in the screen together is my way of organizing it. And then how everything comes in the end, it's I who do that. I do the UI a lot. It is not required for all vacancies. It's always important to ask, because for example, in my team, we have designers that are on a junior level and they cannot do UI well. And then it comes to the designers who have more experience, like me and a few other colleagues, to intervene and say, okay, let's do things differently because this is not looking good. So of course, it's not as I said, they are in my team. So it's not a thing for not hiring people, but you do have to consider if you're not good in UI, you have to be aware and say that to your hiring manager, because it might not be a big deal as it is not in my team. We have people who can do it. I can do it. I can help the other designers, but it's important that you know where your downfalls are.
Okay, sorry for my ignorance now, but also a question from my side. In UX or UI, if you're, for example, developing some app or website, you have to have some programming skills as well.
You do not need to have programming skills to be a UX UI designer. In general, some vacancies require it, but like it's not part of the job. Understanding how web and coding works is quite relevant though, because it helps you not creating, I'm sorry, there's some noise here today. I hope it's not very loud for you. It is not necessary, but it's relevant because if you know how coding works, you'll create designs that are easier to be done by the developers. Because sometimes if you create something that's too out there, the developers are going to look at it, yeah, great, it looks great, but it's not going to be possible to do so.
Yeah, and nowadays we talk also about green design and so forth. So designing something that's also not going to take a lot of resources, for example, to maintain is also something perhaps to consider. I would love to, another question from Mindy. I would love to work in a web store UX. What would you recommend for me to create for my portfolio? I have very little IT skills yet.
So if you would like to create a web shop or like just work in e-commerce in general, if you'd like to work in e-commerce, I think it's really important that you understand marketing and how product life cycles and everything works. because when you create e-commerce experiences, there's a lot more to consider than just looking nice. And so you have to consider, okay, how often do we have new products? How often do things change? Do I need, like, for example, to tell people this is a good product? So do I need a sticker? Do I need reviews? Do I need comments? Do I need a place to put questions? So you really need to understand a lot about how e-commerce in general works. E-commerce is a very complex part of UX, and it does come with a lot of user testing. So in this case, it's also important to understand how A/B testing works, how Google SEO works, how we have also optimized this A/B testing, Google Analytics, because for this specific e-commerce specifically, we use a lot of this and a lot of data as well. So if you have a little bit of data understanding, it's really good.
Great, very good insights again. Let's see, I think that there's a new question. Oh, somebody says that she has to leave. And Gisa, our previous presenter, and she says that she's happy that you stayed and listened to your presentation. But we've reached to the end of the questions in the chat, and also I think that we've reached to the end of the day and our capacities to consume all that very relevant, important, and interesting information. So I think we need to have a little bit of time now to digest everything and let it settle and see what will eventually stick and what will be our future career aspirations coming from this day. Thank you so much for coming. Your presentation was in the very end, but it was so engaging, but I just didn't feel tired anymore. And the whole day has actually run really fast for me. I didn't even feel it lasting so long. Maybe Lucia, you want to have some final words also from your side?
Yes, thanks a lot. It's been amazing, and the participation has been so high through all the day. I'm amazed. It's my first event marathon, and I'm proud of the team, the speakers, the collaboration, and myself. So thank you, Paula. Grazie mille. It's been amazing. Now I will stop the recording officially.